Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so it's 11:01, so we'll get started since we have a short 30-minute webinar for everyone today. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lindsay Usherwood, and I will be playing the part as moderator today. Usherwood Office Technology is a third-generation family-owned business, and my role here is general counsel, and I'm also part of our security team here. Today, we are really excited to bring you this program titled Cyber Insurance. Is cyber insurance a critical part of your cyber attack survival kit? And I'll let you in on a spoiler. The answer is yes, but I'll let the experts explain just why. Representing here, we have Stewart Walts, representing for Usherwood, and we also are excited to have Tucker Lounsbury here, and he is president at NBT Insurance Agency. Both Stewart and Tucker interact with their clients every day on this topic of cyber insurance. You know, whether it's policy claims, policy denials, or, endless questionnaires, the two of them are here to clear the noise and share best practices to navigate the cyber insurance market and to, essentially put your business in the best position to guard against cyber threats. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can pop your question into the right-hand side. There is a question box, and then we will get to those at the end. And so with that, I will let Stewart and Tucker introduce themselves quickly, and we will jump right into the presentation. So if you want to go ahead, Stewart.
Thanks, Lindsay. Stewart Walts, Vice President, Managed IT Services. I've been in the industry and with Usherwood for 22 years now. In my role, working with our clients, cybersecurity posture, making sure they're doing the right things, long-term strategy and budgeting, making sure we're moving them forward from a cybersecurity and overall technology perspective.
Great. I'm Tucker Lounsbury. I'm the president of NBT Insurance. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of NBT Bank. So we cover primarily the New England states, 7 states that we're in. We've got 20 commercial salespeople that work with our customers every single day on this topic. And I'm still doing the same thing and have been working with Usherwood for, I think, about 20 years and 30 years in the business. So look forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you both for the introductions, and we'll hop right to it. So I already gave a spoiler away, but I'm going to ask again. Do you need cyber insurance? And we'll start with you, Stewart.
Sure. So the insurance industry has done more for cybersecurity adoption in small business than anything I've seen in my 22 years in the industry. So from a proactive perspective, being able to get a policy, especially now, is huge and really lowers that risk of actually needing the insurance. So we are big proponents of, yes, it should be in place, and the controls that need to be in place continue to evolve, making clients more protected over time.
Yeah, and I would say for sure. I mean, we're now in an industry, in a space within the industry where it is a regular insurance that is purchased by most businesses. The reason you buy insurance is just to protect the assets that you're working so hard to build. And without cyber insurance today, a lot of companies are finding they actually can't do certain jobs. So it's now required by contract, which has changed things quite a bit over the last, I'd say, 5 years. But in general, you've got to have it because your customers are going to want to have it. You want to have control over protecting your customers' data. And then you've got all these third and fourth party vendors we'll talk about that you're plugging into, and you need to make sure you protect yourself from things that can happen outside of your walls, which you're controlling really well today, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Tucker, I want to dig in more to that. And, what do you think the current state of the cyber insurance market is? And maybe elaborate a little bit on what's on the horizons, that small and medium businesses should be aware of.
Okay, so first off, some positive news. First time in about, I think it's 3, maybe 4 years, where we're actually going to see the cost of the insurance coverage is no longer going up. It has been escalating for 3-4 years at double-digit rates. This year it is flat, and you may get an actual reduction in your cyber insurance, which is fantastic news for everybody. Now, with that, it's going to continue to be a big focus on risk management. That was part of the last 3 years. Cyber insurance helped get everybody safer, and the risk management focus, which you've heard ad nauseum at this point, is you have to have multi-factor authentication. You've got to have you've got to have security built in, so you do need to have that in your systems today. What you're going to hear about tomorrow is just more of broadening your security so that you do have true endpoint connection, and some of the things that Stewart's going to work with the customers at Usherwood to make sure you continue to build out over time.
So before, Stewart, we get to some IT controls, I want to take a step back and for the audience, and maybe we'll go back to the beginnings, which is, what does cyber insurance cover and what does cyber insurance entail? Maybe then we can get back to the controls.
Yeah, that's perfect, because cyber insurance is going to continue to protect two things. It's your first party type claim. So that means you've got a breach, and all of a sudden you've got to send notifications out to all of your customers. You've got to start to spend money to forensically find out what that breach is. So you're going to pay people to help clean up a problem that you have in your systems, and then you're going to notify customers. The other piece that it protects is third party insurance. And that means somebody that was affected by your breach is going to sue you, and you're going to have a third party claim that's going to come from a customer, an employee, somebody that has lost their personal information or their health information, and they're going to have a lawsuit for that. So you've got to look at both of those items as part of this insurance: first party, third party.
Awesome. Thank you for going back to that. And now you mentioned the current state of the cyber insurance market is that you do need some controls in place to be able to obtain coverage. So I was wondering if maybe both of you could kind of talk about what kind of those IT controls are that you would need in order to obtain cyber insurance.
Sure. I can kick off. Tucker mentioned multi-factor authentication. That's really the last 2 or 3 years that's become a non-starter if you don't have that in place, and even the scope of that has increased. Where a few years ago, what we saw was, does the company have multi-factor in front of email, for example, Microsoft 365? That's expanded to any sort of remote access because those are all attack vectors, and the insurance companies want that layer of protection in place for remote access as well, VPN and similar technologies. We've also seen, starting with so antivirus is more of the older school methodology. Endpoint detection and response is a newer term. Think of just more advanced antivirus. And what we've seen recently, maybe the last six months or so, is that changing, the focus changing from an endpoint protection into a managed endpoint detection methodology. Meaning somebody's looking at the endpoints 24/7 and is responding, because attacks aren't 8 o'clock on a Monday. They're typically 5 o'clock on a Friday when everyone's going home. So actually having somebody looking all the time is a big deal, and is shifting the questions that we're seeing in the questionnaires.
Yeah, I'll just add in, I think, Stewart, I think covering the security piece and all that you're putting in place technology wise is so important, and it's really come a long ways because of the MSPs and what you're doing to get all of the small business and mid-sized businesses up to speed. The biggest thing that we're seeing now is training, that we've got to have continuous and ongoing training. So once you have achieved the MFA and some of the endpoint detection, and you have to have the ongoing training, because you're seeing that, and the carriers are seeing the cyber criminals are way out in front of this, and the things change. So having annual or quarterly or even monthly training sprinkled into an organization is really, really important, because business email compromise is a perfect example, and that's probably where most of the attacks originate from. All of that can be avoided if our staffs are trained to not fall for the fish or any of the other types of attacks that you see. And I think you'd agree with that, Stewart, is that's a big thing that we've got to tackle, is how do we keep training fresh on point, and make sure it happens and do the compliance work with it.
Yes, definitely agree. We want users to be in a constant state of paranoia for when they get communications through email, especially. We're also seeing voice phishing is another thing that the user should know about and understand that it's not just email that attacks will come through. So different methodologies there.
Yeah. And Lindsay, I mean, the other piece that we've seen just recently, the criminals are really getting good at getting into backups. So working with your MSP to make sure that backups are definitely cordoned off and secure. You've got to be able to have those work when you do get ransomware or held hostage. If they don't, they're of no use to you. And that's kind of a big a wave that we've seen where they're really getting good at getting into backups.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Go ahead. I will go then. So vulnerability management is another aspect. So think Windows patching, but it goes beyond Windows and Microsoft patching, third party, different applications, different hardware on networks, making sure there's a constant perception of risk and vulnerabilities that exist and a remediation plan is we're seeing that I think on like every questionnaire now. How quickly can you patch vulnerabilities in your environment? So that's another big one.
Thank you, Stewart. So I have another question. So let's say you do or you don't have all these things in place, but let's hope that you do, and you still have some sort of incident happen. What sorts of things would insurance not cover? So I'm thinking along lines of, government fines, software. What are some areas that maybe your cyber insurance won't cover that you need to know about?
Yeah, I'll take that right now. Is the big thing that we're seeing right now, and insurance companies are getting very much more focused on it, is they want to make sure that you're doing your updates. And when I say updates, they want to make sure you don't have any neglected software issues where you've got all of these different softwares that you run your business on, and they're sending you patches. Those patches are coming daily, and if you don't stay current on those and you end up not being current, there is now exclusionary wording in some of the insurance policies that really started over the last few years, where you're going to have some skin in the game if there's a claim and they do find that you're not staying current within reasonable amounts of time to patch all of those different software programs. So I'd say that's the number one thing that we're looking out for. Certainly, you mentioned certain types of fines. You've got to look through the fine print on what fines are going to be covered and what aren't. But we are finding there is some coverage, at least minimal coverage for certain fines in most of the policies. The other piece I would say that's not really cyber insurance, but it is very much related, is crime insurance. You want to make sure that you could get duped with a scheme that has people either emailing or calling and wanting you to wire money or wire gift cards and all these different schemes that we read about daily. Make sure that your cyber insurance is dovetailed with your crime policy, because that's a big piece of the puzzle that you do have to watch out for.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And so that, I guess now, those are some things that won't be covered. But again, you have to look at the fine print and understand what your policy really says. And so maybe Tucker, if you could also answer, what should you look for in coverage? And when you see a policy, you say, okay, this is a good policy for my company. What are some things?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say there is you're going to talk with your insurance professional, but you want to see right off the bat, you want to see quality insurance companies. You want to see names that you recognize. There's a lot of capacity and investment being made into the cyber insurance marketplace. These are financial companies that are investing in the space. They want to attract your premiums. My biggest concern with cyber is you need to have a very robust claims company behind you when you do have a problem. The insurance policy or the piece of paper that you have really is only worth what's behind it. And so we're very, very particular about making sure anybody that buys a cyber policy is going to have the claims coverage that they need when there's a loss, and have that robust claims component where there's people to talk to within an hour, that you're going to have some help, some coaching on who to call and what to do. And that's outside of what the policy might give you. So if you've got a policy that has an odd name, ask you, like, who is this company? Are they a domestic US company? Are they monitored by the regulators in the state that you're in? Or is it an excess surplus lines placement? And is it maybe from a foreign insurance company? So, ask those questions. Your advisor will help you work through that. But I think that's the key today.
Yeah, for sure. I see a lot on LinkedIn of a lot of new people selling cyber insurance. So definitely good to ask those types of questions. Now, speaking of, you kind of mentioned something to the effect of, it's not just about the premium, and it's what's behind the wall there. And so my next question is, what are some things that go beyond, just signing the document and saying, okay, I have a cyber insurance in place, I'm good. Is there anything additional you need to think about throughout the year?
Yeah, it's a perfect question, and it involves Usherwood. So like Stewart's going to be involved with this. You got to get your MSP together. You got to get your insurance provider together, and then you've got to get your insurance carrier at the table. The most important thing you can do is develop an incident response plan. These claims happen, I think Stewart said at 4:30 on a Friday. That's when it's going to happen. And you've got to know who to call, because you're going to have to get a third-party forensic firm in to diagnose what exactly happened. You're going to want to have an attorney / cyber incident coach that can kind of direct and make sure that you're handling the scene of the crime properly, because that's what it is. And then you're going to need to have, like, what do we do if this is ransomware? Most companies, most employers don't have Bitcoin available to pay a ransomware claim if that's something that you do need to do to get back up and running. So you do need to know who all these providers are. The only way you know who that is by working with your insurance providers before the incident to actually go through their panel of providers that they will provide the discounted rates on, select them, have them on a list, and hopefully you've practiced it a couple of times and do a dry run. So I'll add that incident response is the number one thing you can do during the year. And then Stewart's got a bunch of things I'm sure he'd add as an MSP working to make sure that you're ready.
Yeah, definitely. That ongoing every year, the renewal process, answering the questionnaires. One big thing from my perspective on the questionnaires is the questions are often black and white, yes or no questions. The answer is oftentimes not just yes or just no. There's some gray there. So we answer part of the questions for these questionnaires for our clients, and it's important for us to provide the right information, even if it's not completely yes or no. We may answer it, but provide context. So we want to have a good narrative to tell the whole story of what we have. And in some scenarios for newer clients, what we're putting in soon, so they know that we're constantly making improvements over time.
Thank you, Stewart. So I think that, sorry, I get so distracted with the questions. So I think that pretty much covered everything that we had kind of planned. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we jumped into questions from the audience?
Yeah, I think what Stewart was just alluding to, I can't say how much it's so important now to have your technology provider working with a business owner to actually fill out insurance applications. It's gotten far too technology based that someone that's in a controller position, a business owner, somebody that's managing the business, they're not going to understand a lot of the terminology. As insurance professionals, we struggle with it, and we're learning it every day. So working with your MSP to actually help you fill out your insurance questionnaire is not required, but I think it's the smartest thing you can do, because you're going to get the right answers there, and you're not going to find yourselves in a trap where you maybe answer something incorrectly. I'd mentioned the neglected software. That's something that you need to work through to make sure that you're in the right position on that question, so that you don't end up with a co-insurance or having skin in the game if there's a problem.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that, because I know when we fill ours out, it's definitely a team effort, because everybody knows, their little areas. Stewart, any last parting thoughts before we get to some really good questions?
It's complex, continues to evolve, and we didn't touch on all the controls. We do have in the handout section a cybersecurity checklist with a number of other areas you'd want to have understanding of what you have in place for. Definitely take a look at that as well. And it's constantly changing. It's quite exciting if you appreciate the change.
All right, well, thank you both for your time. I think this is a good quick discussion with a lot of meaningful points that people can take back to their companies and execute fairly quickly on looking at their cyber insurance policies. We do have a few questions. 8 more minutes, so I will ask the first question and let the two of you duke it out for who answers first. The first question is, does your cyber insurance also cover business interruption costs and loss of revenue?
Geez, I guess I get that one, unless Stewart wants to jump on that. But that's actually a really good question. It certainly can. So the answer is the policies are basically, it's a property policy when you talk about the first party side. And so part of that property policy is that you need to be able to have business interruption and extra expense, so that if there is an outage, you have a loss, you may not be able to conduct business, and there is going to be a loss of revenue, there's going to be a loss of income, and you are going to potentially have an extra expense if you have to farm out whatever your business does to another related party, to have them step in and provide some of what you did. So you do want to look at that. You want to set the right limit for your business interruption coverage, and you want to look at that extra expense component depending on what kind of business you are, whether that is something that's applicable to you or not. But great question.
Awesome. Thank you, Tucker. And the next question we have is, how is your rate determined, and what impacts the cost the most?
All right, so that's probably me too. So the rate is determined, and all carriers do it a little bit differently, but the starting point is they're going to want to know what your annual revenues are. That's the biggest determination for what your rate is, and that's the starting point. The next piece of it is what industry you're in, what class of business. So there's high hazard classes and there's low hazard classes. If you're a physician's office or a legal firm, you're going to be in more of that high hazard environment, because you've got a lot of data to protect, and you're going to find that they're going to be very much more in tune to what criminals are going to come after, what they're going to go after. If you're a wood company that's out manufacturing a wood product, and that's what you do, it's probably a lower hazard. So that'll be the second component of it. And then I'd say it's how you answer your question here. Is your level of security A+, or you may be a B-, C+? And you can still get coverage with that C- or C+, B-, but it's going to be more expensive.
So that actually relates to the next question that we got, which is also probably for you, Tucker, are there certain industries or high-risk industries that have to have more than standard coverage or are required to have cyber insurance?
Yeah, great question there. And yes, and yes. So when you look at, let's use healthcare for instance, that is the one area that's probably most sensitive to these types of things. You've got health information, very vulnerable. They deal with a lot of software companies that are supporting a hospital system or a physician's practice. So you've really got to have a quality partner there. I will tell you, there's not many cyber insurance carriers that actively will look at those types of industries. So there's a specific number of them that do target, have specialization, and actually work very closely with those higher risk categories. You'll have a relationship directly with your insurer, likely if you're in a higher risk category. So that's really good to be focused on. And then I would say, different types of risk. It all depends on how you fill out those applications, and you're going to fall into different buckets as you go forward. But there is definitely high risk, and you will pay a little bit more. But I'd say more importantly, you're going to have more attention and focus on your account.
Okay. Thank you, Tucker. So I believe that is, let me just double check, that is the last of our questions today. So before we go, any parting thoughts? One thing I want to just probably reiterate is, talking about, asking your cyber insurance company who is on your panel and having them connect you with them. And so probably just want to reiterate that point and your controls in place. Stewart and Tucker, have you touch on that, and then we can let everyone go.
Yep. My main point I leave with is just make sure those questionnaires are answered appropriately. If you answer them incorrectly, you can be denied claims later on, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would say that we've talked about it, but getting that panel and that incident response plan set up, which is what Lindsay's alluding to, get it in writing, and then make sure you look at it more than once a year and test it. Some of the insurance companies now will actually help work with you to do a tabletop exercise, meaning let's do a live go, so that we can test the controls that we have in place and the process that we're going to follow when we think we've got a breach. And I just want to remind people, having a breach is much different than your normal, we've got a fire in the kitchen and we got to call the fire department. When there's a breach, it's something that you get alerted to, and then you start to you peel the onion back, and it's a real challenge, because if you read most of the reports, most cyber criminals, once they're in or there is a breach, they've been there for 3 to 9 months. And when you start to think about that and you're peeling this onion back, you start to find, wow, we've got some things happening here, and we're just finding out what is happening. So it will take hours, if not days, to totally unwrap what may have happened. So having the right people there to help you right from the beginning is really going to be critical, or you're kind of in a dark room, kind of searching for a light switch, and you're not going to find it. So, get the partners around you, work with your MSP to help set that up, and then get your insurance providers at the table to get this figured out.
Awesome. Thank you, Tucker, so much. And thank you, Stewart, for being here today. And thank you to all of our attendees. If you have any additional questions or want to learn more, we are going to put a link in the chat. Oh, nope, we got a QR code lined up. So if you have any questions, feel free to scan the QR code and submit a form. And so that way we can get back to you if you have any questions, concerns, or want to talk about any of these topics any further. And with that, I guess we are all set for today. So thank you to our panelists, and thank you, everyone, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.